All right, young friends, we are going to finish chapter 2 of Harry Potter today that I abruptly cut off on accident yesterday. It was a really good stopping place, so I'm not too concerned. So when we left Harry yesterday, he was actually in Uncle Vernon's new car with cousin Dudley, the big bully, and his friend Piers Polkus, who must be a bully too if they're friends, and Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon, and they were heading to the zoo. Now, I hear the boys coming down the stairs. Jamie, come say hi.
Yeah.
Nobody yet, but it's going to be a YouTube video. Say hi.
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 They're rearranging Gray's room, and I'm a little disconcerted, but they has to wait for a minute.
I'm doing that.
I'm going to.
I'm trying to figure out, you know where the pool went? It's the chairs.
No. Oh, you mean the idea that you guys is looking? We've got an element. They look in the drawers in there. Obviously, the gaming chair needs adjusting. Gray does have a gaming chair. Okay. Had to stop for a moment and have a little discussion, which is going to happen. You know, all these Zoom meetings I'm in, I see lots of side walking. All right. So they're in the car. They're on the way to the zoo. Aunt Petunia, Uncle Vernon, Dudley are not happy. Usually Harry has to stay with Mrs. Fig, the lady with all the cats, whose house smell your prediction was for how long, or not how long, but what you thought was going to happen at the zoo. So let's see if you are correct. You've seen the movie, you probably know, but you don't know the whole story. All right. While he drove, Uncle Vernon complained to Aunt Petunia. He liked to complain about things. People at work, Harry, the council, Harry, the bank, and Harry were just a few of his favorite topics. This morning it was motorcycles. Roaring along like maniacs, the young hoodlums, he said as a motorcycle overtook them. I had a dream about a motorcycle, said Harry, remembering it suddenly. It was flying. Uncle Vernon nearly crashed the car in front. He turned right around in his seat and yelled at Harry, his face like a giant beet with a mustache. Motorcycles don't fly! Dudley and Piers snickered. I know they don't, said Harry. It was only a dream. But he wished he hadn't said anything. If there was one thing the Dursleys hated more than his asking questions, it was his talking about anything, acting in a way that it shouldn't, no matter if it was a dream or even a cartoon. They seemed to think he might get dangerous ideas. It was a very sunny Saturday, and the zoo was crowded with families. The Dursleys bought Dudley and Piers large chocolate ice creams at the entrance, and then, because the smiling lady in the van had asked Harry what he wanted before they could hurry him away, they bought him a cheap lemon ice pop. Wasn't bad either, Harry thought, licking it as they watched a gorilla scratching his head, who looked remarkably like Dudley, except it wasn't blonde. Harry had the best morning he'd had in a long time. He was careful to walk a little apart from the Dursleys so that Dudley and Piers, who were starting to get bored with the animals by lunchtime, wouldn't fall back on their favorite hobby of hitting him. They ate in the zoo restaurant, and when Dudley had a tantrum because his Knickerbocker Glory didn't have enough ice cream on top, that's a cool dessert in England. You can always Google Knickerbocker Glory and see what one looks like. You're going to be like, whoa, I want one of those. Uncle Vernon bought him another one, and Harry was allowed to finish the first. Harry felt afterward that he should have known it was all much too good to last. After lunch, they went to the reptile house. It was cool and dark in there, with lit windows all along the walls. Some good mental movie here. Behind the glass, all sorts of lizards and snakes were crawling and slithering over bits of wood and stone. Ugh. Dudley and Piers wanted to see huge poisonous cobras and thick, man-crushing pythons. Dudley quickly found the largest snake in the place. It could have wrapped its body twice around Uncle Vernon's car and crushed it into a trash can. But at the moment, it didn't look like it was in the mood. In fact, it was fast asleep. Dudley stood with his nose pressed up against the glass, staring at the glistening brown coils. "Make it move," he whined at his father. Uncle Vernon tapped on the glass, but it didn't budge. "Do it again," Dudley ordered. Uncle Vernon rapped on the glass smartly with his knuckles. But the snake just snoozed on. This is boring, Dudley moaned, and he shuffled away. Harry moved in front of the tank and looked intently at the snake. He wouldn't have been surprised if it had died of boredom itself. He wouldn't have been surprised if it had died of boredom himself. No company except stupid people drumming their fingers on the glass, trying to disturb it all day long. It was worse than having a cupboard as a bedroom, where the only visitor was Aunt Petunia, hammering on the door to wake you up. At least he got to visit the rest of the house. The snake suddenly opened its beady eyes. Slowly, very slowly, it raised its head until its eyes were on level with Harry's. It winked. Harry stared. Then he looked quickly around to see if anyone was watching. They weren't. He looked back at the snake and he winked too. The snake jerked its head towards Uncle Vernon and Dudley, then raised its eyes to the ceiling. It gave Harry a look that said quite plainly, I get that all the time. I know, Harry murmured through the glass, though he wasn't sure the snake could hear him. It must be really annoying. The snake nodded vigorously. Where do you come from, anyway? Harry asked. The snake jabbed his tail at the little sign next to the glass, and Harry peered at it. Boa constrictor, Brazil. Was it nice there? The boa constrictor, jabbed its tail at the sign again, and Harry read on. This specimen was bred in the zoo. Oh, I see. So you've never been to Brazil. Jamie has his nose pressed against the glass of my office. Just like Dudley had his nose pressed to the glass of the reptile cage. Yes, Jamie. We'll see. Goodbye.
Time to go.
All right. They're going to keep disturbing me. They're asking for a new video game now. Oh, Lord help us. Okay. The boa constrictor jabbed his tail at the sign again, and Harry read on. This specimen was bred in the zoo. Oh, I see. So you've never been to Brazil. As the snake shook his head, a deafening shout behind Harry made both of them jump. Dudley! Mr. Dursley, come and look at the snake. You won't believe what it's doing. Yes, I'm reading Harry Potter. Goodbye. Go away. They're interrupting chickens. Dudley came waddling as fast as he could. Out of the way, you, he said, punching Harry in the ribs. Caught by surprise, Harry fell hard on the concrete floor. What came next happened so fast that no one saw how it happened. 1 second, Piers and Dudley were leaned right up close to the glass. The next, they had leapt back with howls of horror. Harry sat up and gasped. The glass front of the boa constrictor's tank had vanished. The great snake was uncoiling itself rapidly, slithering out onto the floor. People throughout the reptile house screamed and started running for the exits. The snake slid swiftly past him. Harry could have sworn a low, hissing voice said, Brazil, here I come. Thanks, amigo. Keeper of the reptile house was in shock. But the glass, he kept saying, where did the glass go? The zoo director himself made Aunt Petunia a cup of strong, sweet tea while he apologized over and over again. Piers and Dudley could only gibber. As far as Harry can see, the snake hadn't done anything except for snap playfully at their heels as it passed. But by the time they were all back in Uncle Vernon's car, Dudley was telling them how it had nearly bitten off his leg, while Piers was swearing it had tried to squeeze him to death. But worst of all, for Harry at least, was Piers calming down enough to say, Harry was talking to it, weren't you, Harry? Uncle Vernon waited until Piers was safely out of the house before starting in on Harry. He was so angry he could barely speak. He managed to say, Go, cupboard, stay, no meals, before he collapsed into his chair, and Aunt Petunia had to run to get him a large brandy. Harry lay in his cupboard much later, wishing he had a watch. He didn't know what time it was, and he couldn't be sure that the Dursleys were asleep. Until they were, he couldn't risk sneaking into the kitchen for food. He'd lived with the Dursleys for almost 10 years, 10 miserable years, as long as he could remember, ever since he'd been a baby and his parents had died in that car crash. He couldn't remember being in the car when his parents had died, Sometimes when he strained his memory during long hours in his cupboard, he came up with a strange vision, this blinding flash of green light and a burning pain on his forehead. This, he supposed, was the crash, though he couldn't imagine where all the green light had come from. He couldn't remember his parents at all. His aunt and uncle never spoke about them, and of course he was forbidden to ask any questions. There were no photographs of them in the house. When he had been younger, Harry had dreamed and dreamed of some unknown relation coming to take him away, but it had never happened. The Dursleys were his only family. Yet sometimes he thought, or maybe hoped, that strangers in the street seemed to know him. Very strange strangers they were, too. A tiny man with a violet top hat had bowed to him once while he was out shopping with Aunt Petunia and Dudley. After asking Harry furiously if he knew the man, Aunt Petunia had rushed them out of the shop without buying anything. A wild-looking old woman dressed in all green had waved merrily at them once on the bus. A bald man in a very long purple coat had actually shaken his hand in the street the other day and then walked away without saying a word. The weirdest thing about all these people was the way they seemed to vanish the second Harry tried to get a closer look. At school, Harry had no one. Everybody knew that Dudley's gang hated that odd Harry Potter in his baggy old clothes and broken glasses, and nobody liked to disagree with Dudley's gang. Poor Harry. That's the end of Chapter 2. Tomorrow we will start Chapter 3. Chapter 3 is The Letters from No One. Now, I don't know if that happened quite as you thought it happened. It's different than in the movie. In the movie, he gets trapped. Dudley gets trapped inside of the snake exhibit. But in the book, it just disappears and the snake gets away. So, tomorrow, Letters from No One. What could that possibly be? We will find out. I will see you tomorrow. I hope you have a great day today. Love you guys.